What happens when an entire state's political rhythm, a rhythm that's been as perfectly predictable as a metronome for decades, just suddenly breaks its own rules?
Oh, it creates this immediate sense of vertigo, like the ground is shifting.
Right. Imagine you're listening to a beat, You're tapping your foot, you know exactly when the next strike is coming. You can feel the momentum building, and then
Silence.
exactly, the beat just drops out. The whole pattern shatters.
And when an established pattern breaks like that, everyone, the politicians, the analysts, and especially the voters themselves, they're suddenly standing on really unsteady ground trying to figure out what the new rhythm is actually going to be.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking the incredibly tight, just psychologically complex landscape of the 2026 Kerala Legislative Assembly election.
It is a fascinating case study, honestly.
It really is. And just to be completely clear right out of the gate, we do not have a horse in this race. We aren't taking sides between the ruling LDF, the opposition UDF, or the NDA.
Right, strictly impartial.
Completely. We're just impartially reporting the analysis contained in our source document, an excerpt titled Kerala 2026, A Maturing Electorate and the Quest for Continuity. We're just looking at the math and the voter psychology to help you understand the mechanics of this election.
Which is a crucial baseline for us to operate from, because the core theme we are exploring today is a massive fundamental shift in human behavior.
A shift away from what exactly?
Well, we're watching Kerala transition away from what we might call noisy, wave-based, highly ideological voting. Instead, the analysis points toward this heavily nuanced, micro-calculated pragmatism.
Wow, okay, so the electorate is basically changing how it thinks.
Precisely. To understand the sheer tension hanging over this upcoming 2026 election, we really have to look backward for a second. We have to understand the historical baseline that got shattered in the first place.
Right, because for decades, Kerala's politics operate on this perfectly predictable cycle. Power just, simply alternated.
It swung back and forth like a pendulum.
Yeah, exactly, between two major alliances. You had the Left Democratic Front, or LDF, and the United Democratic Front, the UDF. One term LDF, the next term UDF.
Yeah.
Over and over again.
It was treated almost like a law of political physics in the region. You could practically set your watch to the anti-incumbency vote every 5 years. It was deeply structural.
But then comes 2021, and the LDF actually retains power. They win an unprecedented consecutive term.
Which broke the historical pattern completely.
Right, that perfectly ticking metronome we talked about, it skipped a beat. And that brings us to the psychological weight hanging over 2026. Everyone is in total suspense. Is the needle going to swing back, or is the metronome permanently altered?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, breaking a long-term historical pattern fundamentally changes voter psychology. Think about it. When you have a pendulum that just swings back and forth automatically, voters can operate on a certain degree of autopilot.
Yeah, that throw the bums out mentality just becomes the default setting.
Exactly. You don't even really need a deeply compelling reason. It's just, well, it's their turn to leave. Right.
But when a government wins a consecutive term, that autopilot is forcefully turned off. Voters have to stop and actively reevaluate their choices.
Like they're asking themselves, wait, why did we keep them in power last time? And do we actually want to do it again?
Yes. It demands a much higher cognitive load from the electorate. They can't just rely on tradition anymore.
It forces them to look closer at what's actually happening on the ground. And, looking at the current landscape under this consecutive LDF term, the voter sentiment isn't black and white, it's deeply layered.
Very layered.
On one hand, voters are openly acknowledging the government's successes. They see the stability, the welfare delivery, the crisis management during tough times.
And the infrastructure projects.
Yeah, they recognize the good stuff. But on the other hand, there is this creeping sensation that the source describes as soft anti-incumbency.
That word soft is doing a lot of heavy lifting there, and it's really the key differentiator in this election. Actually, let me push back on that word soft for a second. If people are looking at their grocery bills, worrying about rising costs, dealing with unemployment, and feeling frustrated by bureaucratic inertia, why call that soft?
It's a fair point.
That sounds like a pretty hard, tangible reason to be angry at a government.
It is, but the distinction is really about how the anger manifests. Hard anti-incumbency is explosive. It's people marching in the streets. It's a massive corruption scandal. It's a highly controversial bill that dominates the news cycle.
Got it. It's loud and undeniable.
Exactly. Soft anti-incumbency, however, is more of an atmospheric condition. It's a slow, quiet accumulation of minor daily frictions. It's the price of milk creeping up or, sluggish paperwork at a local government office.
It's just a general sense of fatigue with the administration. You aren't storming the gates, but your patience is wearing incredibly thin.
Right.
So is soft anti-incumbency kind of like staying at a comfortable job where you genuinely, like your immediate coworkers, in this case your local political representatives, but you're just frustrated enough with corporate management that you're quietly brising lust in on your lunch break?
That is a highly accurate way to look at it, especially because the data shows a fascinating split. The individual local MLAs, the representatives on the ground, remain highly popular.
So the voters still like their coworkers.
They do. But the broader administration and the top-level ministers are facing heavy scrutiny. And from a political strategy standpoint, this atmospheric, soft anti-incumbency is actually much harder for politicians to fight.
Because there's no single fire to put out.
Exactly. If you are a politician facing a massive scandal, you can debate that flashpoint. You can fire somebody or repeal a policy, and the anger subsides, the pressure releases.
Right.
But you can't just give one grand sweeping speech and magically fix the general vibe of bureaucratic fatigue or the creeping cost of living. It requires proving competence on a micro level, day after day.
Which perfectly explains the next major shift we are seeing in the source material. If voters aren't driven by some grand, sweeping ideological anger, but by this quiet, daily questioning, they start focusing their attention hyper-locally.
Yes, the micro-level issues.
The analysis points to a massive, undeniable shift toward performance-based metrics, particularly among urban and younger voters. We're talking about a sudden, intense focus on poor infrastructure, traffic congestion,
and the neglect of traditional community markets.
Yeah, which raises an important question about what modern governance actually looks like to the end user. I mean, for a long time, political loyalty in many regions was treated almost like sports fandom.
Oh, absolutely. You wore the team colors, you supported the ideology, and you defended them regardless of the season's statistics.
Well, wait a minute. Kerala is historically one of the most highly ideological, politically literate states in all of India. Are you telling me they are just abandoning decades of deep, entrenched political philosophy for better streetlights and a cleaner local market?
Well, they aren't abandoning their philosophy, but they are absolutely reprioritizing it. It's the ultimate pragmatism, and what it signifies is a maturing electorate.
A maturing electorate, okay.
Right. An ideology is a luxury when your daily commute is an hours-long nightmare, or when the traditional market, where your family has bought food for generations, is just falling into disrepair.
That makes a lot of sense. You care about the big ideas, but at the end of the day, your daily reality takes precedence.
Exactly. A maturing electorate demands tangible, daily impact over theoretical political rhetoric. They are looking at the ballot box as a performance review, not a loyalty oath. The philosophy only matters if the potholes are filled.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. Just as you wrap your head around this hyper-local voter who is obsessing over the streetlights in the local market, there is a massive curveball.
Oh, the global aspect.
Yes. These exact same voters are simultaneously casting their votes based on global geopolitics.
It sounds like a complete paradox at first glance.
A total paradox. How is a voter equally swayed by the neglect of a traditional market down the street and shifting geopolitical alliances in the Middle East? Those feel like they belong in completely different universes.
They do, but to understand that paradox, you have to look at Kerala's unique economic DNA and the decades of history behind it. Kerala has a massive, deep-rooted connection to the Gulf region.
Right.
We are talking about millions of Malayalis, the people of Kerala who have migrated to live and work in the Middle East over the decades.
Ah, the remittance economy, the money they send back home.
Yes, and it is a foundational pillar of the state's entire economy. So when there is a regional conflict in the Middle East, or a sudden shift in labor laws in a Gulf nation, or fluctuating global oil prices.
That isn't just abstract international news playing on a television in the background.
Not at all. That is an immediate, direct threat to the job security of a son, a daughter, or a spouse living abroad. It directly impacts the flow of money coming into the household in Kerala.
So for these voters, global economics literally is local economics.
Precisely. International developments intersect with state-level voting behavior in a way that is incredibly rare. You have families sitting at the dinner table discussing a local municipal issue like that broken traditional market.
Right.
And in the next breath, they are analyzing foreign policy in the Gulf because both of those things dictate their actual survival.
Wow. That adds such a wildly complex layer to how these campaigns have to communicate. You can't just promise to fix the roads. You have to project a sophisticated understanding of international stability.
It's a very difficult tightrope to walk.
Okay, let's unpack this. We've got the psychological weight of historical shifts. We've got this LinkedIn browser, soft anti-incumbency. We've got hyper-local civic focus. And we've got Gulf geopolitics.
That's a lot of moving parts.
It is. How does all of this complex, contradictory human behavior actually translate into numbers and strategy on the ground?
It translates into a razor-thin margin of error. The upcoming 2026 election is shaping up to be an absolute cliffhanger.
Yeah, the numbers in the opinion polls are genuinely stressful to look at. Let's look at the math, the magic number. To win a majority and form the government, an alliance needs 71 seats.
Right.
The current projections, the LDF is hovering right around 61 to 71 seats, and the UBF is breathing right down their necks at 58 to 69 seats. They're basically tied.
They're both essentially within striking distance of that 71-seat threshold, which means every single demographic microshift matters.
And because it's so tight, the margins become everything. We're seeing the rise of the silent voter. There's a notable increase in no-to votes, meaning voters who show up to the booth just to officially select none of the above.
Which is a huge indicator of that soft anti-incumbency we talked about.
Right. Plus, the victory margins in recent past elections have been getting narrower and narrower. That points to a high level of quiet dissatisfaction, a block of voters who are just waiting to be convinced or waiting to punish someone.
Right.
Which makes me wonder about the spoiler effect. Where does a third party like the NDA, led by the nationally dominant BJP, fit into this puzzle? They aren't historically winning huge numbers of seats in Kerala, so how do they impact a race this tight?
It all comes down to the brutal, unforgiving mechanics of vote splitting.
Okay, walk me through that.
Let's take a hypothetical, tightly contested constituency. Imagine the LDF and the UDF are fighting over, say, 100,000 total voters in one district. In the past, maybe the LDF wins that specific seat by a margin of just 2,000 votes. It's a close win, but a win.
Okay.
Now, introduce a third force like the NDA that runs a highly targeted, aggressive campaign focusing heavily on infrastructure and very specific welfare promises. They might only peel away 4,000 or 5,000 votes total.
Right, which isn't nearly enough for that third force to actually win the seat themselves.
Not even close. But if those 4,000 votes were drawn primarily from demographics that historically lean toward the LDF, that previous 2,000 vote margin of victory completely vanishes.
Oh, wow. So the seat flips to the UDF.
Exactly. Or vice versa, depending on whose base gets fractured. When the gap between the top two contenders is practically zero, a third party taking even a 4% vote share acts as a kingmaker.
Or rather, a kingbreaker.
Yes. They dictate the strategy of the two giant alliances just by existing in the margins.
They are essentially landmines on the electoral map. You don't know who is going to step on them, but they are going to cause massive collateral damage.
That's a great way to put it.
And that's exactly why everyone is obsessively watching traditional strongholds that are suddenly looking vulnerable. There are specific bellwether constituencies, places like Ulur and Parasala, that are under a microscope right now.
Bellwethers are fascinating barometers because they are essentially microcosms of the entire state's psychology. Historically, whichever way Ulur and Parasala vote, the entire state of Kerala votes.
They are the canary in the coal mine.
Exactly. If a traditional stronghold in a bellwether district starts showing fractures, the campaigns know they have a statewide problem.
So if you're a campaign manager, you are losing sleep over every single street corner in Parasala right now.
Oh, without a doubt.
Which leads us to the final cards these parties are playing. We have these three forces, and they are all looking at this impossibly tight, deeply pragmatic math. What are their actual pitches going into the final stretch, and are they actually viable?
Well, the strategies perfectly mirror the layers of voter sentiment we've discussed. The LDF, holding that incumbent advantage, is pushing a narrative of pure stability.
Right, playing it safe.
Yeah, they are leaning heavily into governance continuity, welfare expansion, and their track record. They are essentially saying, we steered you through massive crises before, don't change horses midstream.
While the UDF is looking at that soft anti-incumbency and trying to turn it into hard votes, they are pitching a governance reset.
A governance reset, yeah.
They are trying to be the alternative for the people quietly browsing LinkedIn saying, we can fix the bureaucratic inertia and the rising costs. But I have to ask, Is a governance reset actually a compelling pitch for someone just annoyed at bureaucratic paperwork? It sounds a bit abstract.
That is the ultimate challenge for the UDF. Governance reset sounds great in a press release, but to a voter demanding pragmatic local results, they have to prove how they will reset it.
Right, the actual mechanics of it.
If they can't connect that abstract slogan to the price of milk and the traffic congestion, it won't land. Meanwhile, the NDA is leaning into that spoiler role by targeting very specific, neglected demographics with welfare promises and hyper-focused infrastructure messaging.
Just trying to peel off enough votes to disrupt the traditional math.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? When the dust finally settles on counting day, what are we actually going to see? The source analysis lays out 3 potential scenarios for the verdict. Let's debate them.
Okay, let's do it.
Scenario 1 is a narrow, historic 3rd consecutive term for the LDF. They have a slight structural advantage in terms of sheer organizational strength and incumbency. But, as we noted, they are carrying the heavy burden of governance fatigue.
Then scenario 2 is a slim comeback for the UDF. This would mean they successfully validated their governance reset pitch.
Right.
It would mean they gathered up all that quiet atmospheric frustration, united the fractured demographics, and turned it into a winning margin.
And then there's scenario 3, a hung assembly. A situation where no one reaches that magic number of 71, and the government is decided by frantic, closed-door, post-election negotiations. But let me challenge that. Has a hung assembly ever even been a realistic threat in a state so historically divided into 2 neat camps?
Historically, no. Because the pendulum always swung decisively one way or the other. The waves took care of the mass.
Right, the wave just washed over everything.
But without a wave, and with margins this incredibly tight, a hung assembly is mathematically possible. If the third-party spoiler effect works a little too well in just 5 or 6 key constituencies, neither major alliance crosses the threshold.
Wow.
It's unlikely. But the fact that analysts are even modeling it shows how fractured the landscape has become.
It really paints a picture of an era that has fundamentally shifted. The days of massive, sweeping political waves where the whole state just gets swept up in an ideological fervor and hands over a landslide victory, those days seem to be largely over. They've been replaced by these quiet, localized, highly pragmatic calculations.
And what's fascinating here is that this is the ultimate sign of a maturing democracy. When the massive political waves die down, what you are left with is pure, unadulterated accountability.
Accountability, yeah.
You have an electorate that absolutely cannot be taken for granted. Their loyalty isn't inherited anymore. It must be continually earned, pothole by pothole, policy by policy.
It's an electorate that is looking at the receipt before they leave the store.
Precisely. They're checking the math.
Well, the 2026 Kerala election is shaping up to be an absolute masterclass in electoral complexity. You've got local traditional markets falling into disrepair, colliding with Gulf geopolitics.
It's wild.
You've got the psychological weight of a broken historical pendulum meeting the quiet, creeping dissatisfaction of soft anti-incumbency. It is quite literally a race that is too close to call.
It is. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought to ponder that builds on this idea of the maturing electorate.
Okay, lay it on us.
We've established that voters are becoming increasingly hyper-focused on immediate personal impact performance metrics, local civic issues, the daily cost of living. They are moving away from broad, sweeping ideological alliances. But if that's true, how will political parties adapt their long-term visions?
Oh, that is a critical question.
Right. If the end of sweeping political waves means voters only care about what happens in their immediate zip code over the next 12 months, does that also mean the end of bold statewide visionary projects?
That's a genuinely scary thought.
Will governments be forced to abandon long-term, decades-long planning just to become hyper-focused municipal managers, patching markets and filling potholes merely to survive the next brutal, razor-thin election cycle?
Are we trading big generational dreams for better local streetlights? And if we are, is that a trade-off we're actually okay with? Think about that the next time you drive over a pothole in your own neighborhood. We want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you, keep looking for the rhythm, and we'll catch you next time. We might not know where the needle is going to swing next, but we know the metronome will never sound quite the same.